Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I tell you what we got right yesterday was the decision to talk about that so-called shrine to the burglar outside the home of the man that killed the burglar while defending himself and his disabled wife from a raid in the middle of the night. That story has escalated quite horribly and bizarrely now to a sort of toing and froing whereby local residents, as was suggested to us by a caller who lived around the corner yesterday, are taking down these so-called tributes, and the family of the dead burglar are returning to put them up again. I don't know that it lends itself to another hour of conversation on this programme, but I sort of keep you up to speed with any developments there as and when they happen. Also in the news today, of course, the European Commission has raided the London offices of 21st Century Fox. This is part of a continent-wide investigation into possible rigging of sports right prices. It's interesting that, isn't it? Because you'll remember the abandonment of Leveson 2, despite it being, I think, a manifesto pledge for the Conservatives in 2015. The abandonment of Leveson 2, the second part of the Leveson inquiry, was the conclusive proof, if anyone still needed it, of this government's abject fear of Rupert Murdoch. It's just a little reminder that we are currently still part of an organisation that's not frightened of Rupert Murdoch, namely the European Commission, but we won't be part of it for much longer, which is, of course, exactly what Rupert Murdoch wanted, and the fact that he's now having his offices raided and his business practices investigated by the Commission might give you a slightly better indication of why Rupert Murdoch jumped, or instructed the Sun newspaper to jump the way it jumped in that referendum than you had previously. So I'll keep an eye on that for you today as well. But we're going to talk about something rather different. And I'm not going to lie to you. I never do. But I didn't really want to talk about this, and I was wrong. Beth, who produces this programme, was keen that we did address it, and I didn't like it. And I think part of the reason I didn't want to talk about it was because it reminds me of being a schoolboy debater. And odd though that sounds, these are the issues that sometimes put me off, because I get quite dispirited by the idea of them coming round again and still being controversial. I thought we'd moved away from telling women what they can and can't do with their own bodies. I really did, for religious reasons, which is pretty much the only rationale for opposing a woman's right to choose, for opposing abortion. It is because you believe in God, and you think that whatever you've attached to that belief, whatever you've managed to persuade yourself of using scriptures or sentiment, gives you the right to tell other people what they can and can't do with their own lives and their own bodies. It always comes down to God. And I was, believe it or not, I was the 15-year-old Catholic kid standing up in big halls arguing against abortion. I used to passionately argue against it, and I continued to argue passionately against it until I was 16 or 17 years old, and I thought I'd got someone pregnant. And the idea that I had the right to tell her what she could or couldn't do was just so palpably absurd that in the blink of an eye, and I was still at the monastic boarding school where I'd been inculcated, educated, informed that abortion was always wrong. I was still at the same school. I remember it was literally a moment, a single moment, and everything changed. Well, what the hell have you got to do with it? And if me, as the bloke who thought that he'd got the girl pregnant, recognised that he had no right in that equation, then who the hell are these monks? Who are these men in frocks to sit there telling her what she can and can't do? So, you know, sayonara to that. I used to draw on my own adoption as well. I used to say, if and this probably would have worked the other way with a different crowd, I used to say if the rules in Ireland had been different, I wouldn't be here today, because my biological mother had to cross the Irish Sea and give birth to me in Derby, and hope that I'd be taken into a loving family, but not being 100% confident that I would be. She got that right, thank God. I couldn't have been... I couldn't have had a better family, a more loving family. But I used to think that was a very powerful argument against abortion. It's quite arrogant, that. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. You, James, arrogant? Never. It is a little bit arrogant to think that there's a really powerful argument against abortion is your own existence. I wouldn't be here today if Ireland had had strict abortion laws. I beg your pardon, if it hadn't had strict abortion laws in the 1970s. So that's why I don't like talking about it, because it's so, for anybody who genuinely has dog in the race. It's so personal. And for people who don't genuinely have a dog in the race, it's so obnoxious for you to tell them what they can and can't do with their person, with themselves. That's arrogant. You know, to tell another human being that because of your beliefs, they're not allowed to do what they want to do. That's the absolute point at which religion goes nuts. And then you come to the question of public protest, which is why abortion is in the news again today. And you, as a supporter of free speech, recognise people's rights to hold and indeed share opinions, but does that extend to, as has happened in Ealing, does that extend to them being allowed to stand outside an abortion clinic calling people going in murderers? Because now they're not allowed to anymore. Now the protests have been outlawed. So there's a sort of exclusion zone around this one clinic. And this will be a decision taken by the council, presumably. There's an exclusion zone around this one clinic which would prevent protesters from attending. You can't really police what they do. I mean, within the confines of the law, I suppose they can say whatever they want, can't they? So it sounds pretty obnoxious. Here's the question. I think to start with, 11 minutes after 11, to start with, I'd like to hear from you if you've encountered these protesters while trying to access a clinic. I don't care what country you were in or what council you were under. We will talk more specifically about the scenario in Ealing, I suspect, in the hour. You don't need to, if you're concerned thusly, obviously you can use whatever name you want, or you can change the location from which you're calling. If you want to, there's no reason why you would want to. For me, there's no shame in abortion, no shame whatsoever. That's kind of the point. The anti-abortion campaigners want you to feel shame. You shouldn't. But I'd love to know what happens. I'd love to actually know, because I have no real personal experience of it. I've seen news reports, I've seen the banners, I've seen the placards, I've seen the, frankly, astonishing scenes in America when these religious evangelicals get on the war horse. But this is a radical move by Ealing Council, which has said it wishes to protect women from distress and intimidation at the Mary Stopes Clinic. It's received high-profile support from politicians, including Sadiq Khan and Jeremy Corbyn. I don't know why they've only mentioned Labour politicians. I'm reading this from one newspaper. It's, needless to say, it's a Catholic organisation that has held regular protests outside the clinic. This includes handing women teddy bears and calling them mum. They deny that that's harassing. They deny that that's harassment. I respect your right to hold your beliefs. Okay? But I don't respect your right to terrorise women who are exercising their legal right to choose what happens to their own body. So the question then becomes, should Ealing, it's a vote, it's a unanimous vote in favour of a buffer zone around this clinic so that women can get in and out without seeing these protesters. Do you approve? 0345 606 0973. But I am, 13 minutes after 11, I am, in the first instance, I am more interested in the question of what it's like. So it doesn't, by any stretch of the imagination, have to be this clinic that you refer to, but the simple experience. Because when you are contemplating a termination, it is not something that the massive majority of women enter into lightly. It is not something that is easy or pleasant or any of those things. And it can be quite traumatic. Why would you seek to add to that trauma? Because of your religious beliefs that aren't shared by the person you're seeking to terrorise or traumatise. What actually happens? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Because I can conceive of quotes, protests, end quotes, that probably could be allowed. I'm not going to say should, It's usually the horror stories. So when I was a cocky 15-year-old boy telling grown women what they can and can't do with their own bodies, I would have the usual horror stories ready, and then the other side would have the same horror stories about what would happen with illegal backstreet abortions if you banned women's access to legal, properly policed abortions. I know all of those arguments. And you can't stop people having different beliefs from you, or different opinions from you, or different views, but you can stop them from intimidating, harassing and distressing other women. So what do they do? 0345 6060 973 is a number to call. Tell me what happens outside a clinic that you have visited. And of course it can be men or women ringing in, because quite often you'll go to the clinic as a couple. I want to know what actually happens to prompt these descriptions, and then I want to know what you think about the decision Ealing Council has taken. Should this be rolled out across the country? Should all clinics, all Mary Stopes clinics, up and down the country, be legally enforced no-go zones for this particular type of protester? It's 11:15. Sorry, this is it's sort of unpleasant conversation. I think it's an important one, and I need you to ring me, because sometimes when I don't want to talk about something for reasons of sort of personal prejudice almost, I need you to remind me occasionally why these conversations are important. 11:15 is the time. What happens? That's where we'll start. Talk me through your experience outside one of these clinics, the gamut, if you like, that you had, the gauntlet you had to run just to get in. 0345 6060 973. Having it's an uncomfortable conversation, but it is quite an important one. Where should you be allowed to protest? Where should you be allowed to share your views in a democracy that respects, with obviously limits, it respects freedom of speech as much as any country in the world? Well, if you are opposed to abortion, you are perfectly free to make that case almost anywhere in the country, but you're not allowed to make it outside an abortion clinic into which women in a often emotional state are seeking access. That seems to me to be reasonable. So I don't really want to have an argument today, although this is why I don't like this subject much, because I don't know whether we'll be able to get to 12 o'clock without having an argument about whether abortion is right or wrong. I don't want to do that today. I want to have an argument or a conversation about whether or not the protests should be allowed outside the clinics. Heather is in Richmond. Heather, what would you like to say?
Well, I actually do live around the corner from a clinic, which I was unaware was there until I saw these people outside.
The protesters?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually next door to my doctor's surgery, so on leaving the doctor's surgery, I felt the need to actually go and speak to them, because I thought it was awful.
What were they doing?
There was one woman actually by the gateway to the entrance of the clinic, holding her rosary and a little book and what have you, and people opposite the clinic with pictures of a fetus on a card saying "Love me too" and all the rest of it, and all holding their rosaries. There was a guy pacing up and down the road with his rosary.
It's always a guy.
And it's just people. I had to have one many years ago when my first marriage ended.
Yes. And
it's not a decision you enter into lightly. I found out a week later, after my husband decided that we were ending, that our second baby was due.
Yes. So
I knew that I couldn't cope with a baby. I had a 2-year-old at the time.
You don't have to. You don't have to justify it to me or anyone, Heather.
I know, but it's just a decision that I had to make, and it was probably the worst decision I had to make in my life. And it was for our futures that I had to make that decision, and I had to go and have that done. It was very early on, so it's a decision, but it's the pressure of these people outside adding it on. These women are going there because they've made the decision. They get counselling in there, and they do not need this extra pressure and people shoving their morals down your throat.
Yeah.
Because they did actually approach a girl and speak to her at the doorway, at the gateway.
Do we know what they said? You were quite shocked by this, weren't you? I can tell that you just couldn't quite believe your eyes that day.
I know. It was just like, what do you think you're doing? This is really shameful. I said, you may have your reasons and your beliefs, But you don't have the right to stand here and shove it down these girls' throats because they've made a decision, which is hard enough, but they don't need this added pressure.
Yes. Yes, so this then becomes about geography, doesn't it? Not about beliefs. It's about where they should be allowed to...
At that point of making a decision, if you have doubt, then you can seek these people out that say that they are there with...
Well, I wouldn't advise anyone ever to do that. There'll be plenty of people that you can go to for help and counselling, and you reserve the right in a free country to change your mind before the operation occurs. But I don't think your characters with their rosaries and their loudhailers marching up and down outside the clinics are going to be of much use in any circumstances, are they?
No. No, they're all very meek and, low-voiced and all the rest of it. But I was like, no, you're just...
Well, they're religious fundamentalists. So it's not necessarily an insult, although in my vocabulary it is intended to be. What did they say when you tried to talk to them?
Oh, but they're there to help and that they're there to offer another way out and that they will fund these women. I said, what? So if these girls are having to make a decision other than be thrown out from their family if they go through with this, then you're there to house them and support her and the child for their first years of life. Mm. And she was saying yes, but there's no way that they would be able to afford that.
No, but that puts a slightly different spin on things, doesn't it? In that if a decision is being made exclusively for economic reasons, and the young woman would rather have the baby but is not having it for financial reasons, and someone did write her a big cheque, that would put a slightly different complexion on things, actually. I hadn't thought of that before. I mean, I'm on your side of this argument, but that shows why it's not necessarily quite as binary an argument as it can sometimes appear.
Yeah, if someone could come on and tell me that they actually did go that path and that they have supported them throughout the first 5 years of that child's life, then great.
And you don't need to be stamping up and down outside a clinic with a loudhailer and a rosary. You could just have a little advert somewhere saying, if you are thinking of having a termination for economic reasons, please get... Well, I don't know how you police that.
In a doctor's surgery,
Yeah, I hear you. Thanks, Heather. It's a lovely start to the conversation. 0345 6060 973. Ewan's been in touch via Twitter. He's one of my Irish listeners. There are protesters camped outside a family planning clinic in Limerick, so that will be more about contraception than abortion, wouldn't it, a family planning clinic? That's how brainwashed some people in Ireland are by the Catholic Church. I do hope Ireland repeals the 8th Amendment, #repeal the 8th. It's in the women's best interest for health reasons. Very live story in Ireland at the moment. And that notion of contraception also being something that the Church teaches against underpins another story we're going to talk about today, which is caused by religious leaders to get rid of the two-child benefit rule. You remember it came in last year. If you have more than 2 children, you won't get, henceforth, you won't get child benefit for the third and further. And Conservatives in the church, in a lot of Conservatives with a small c, and a lot of congregations have come together, Muslims, Christians, to call for this to be axed because it discriminates against people who believe that contraception is wrong. I mean, that's a humdinger as well, isn't it? The idea that your beliefs entail you getting money that politicians have decided you shouldn't get. Good Lord. Tony is in Belfast. There you go. Tony, what would you like to say?
Good morning. First time caller. Go easy on me. I know you will.
Of course I will.
Okay, look, my reading of the situation is that the difficulty arises where the protest clearly becomes harassment.
Yes.
Now, my experience of what actually happened in regard to myself, I was on my way home and there was a protest outside the Mary Stopes Clinic in Belfast. And I was witness to a young lady who was approaching the front door who was basically surrounded by 3 or 4 protesters. Now, I basically thought, well, I'd have to try and cause some sort of distraction. So I approached the same people who turned on me. It actually was a bit like, I don't know if you're familiar with the film A Million Years BC, where the hero throws a rock at the raptor who turns towards him. But that's what actually happened.
I doff my cap to you for your popular culture analogies. Is that the one where? Is that the one with Raquel Welch in it?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the only thing I can remember. I'll have to go to confession now, Tony.
So anyway, they basically turned to me. They had cameras on the lapels, which they were clearly filming. They called the police, who approached me. Then they took a statement. I then ended up in a police station within the following week. The case then was referred to the Public Prosecution Service.
Great.
We eventually, by the way, turned it down. But to me, that was an example of an attempt to deter people from actually, protesting against their protest, if you like. You know?
Yes. I mean, had you raised your voice and stuff, they were accusing you of harassment, were they, or of...
Well, exactly. But of course, being the meek-mannered person that I am, I was trying to be rational, which was clearly not working.
So this is where I mean, I'm probably wrong to say I don't want to have the argument with the person who might be there, but this is where you do wonder what motivates them, because they seem very angry and aggressive while claiming to be acting out of care and compassion, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. It's hypocritical to the extreme. I mean, they're on their knees. They're reading scriptural quotes on the pavements as well. So they're quite busy. But there's a large degree of hypocrisy in terms of how they actually treat these young girls, especially young girls who are trying to obtain information at that point.
Yes.
Not even make a decision, but just to obtain, the proper guidance in terms of what options are open to them.
So, when you came on, you said that the key issue was the line between protest and harassment. I'm not sure that you can police that line, actually, because if they're standing there in any way, shape, or form, then, well, I mean, Ealing Council have taken the decision that they're not allowed to do anything. They have to stay away completely. So there's no line between protest and harassment there. You're not allowed to... I don't know how you'd protest in a way that wasn't obnoxious, I guess, is what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way.
Yeah, but maybe it's the degree of obnoxiousness. Maybe is the problem. I mean, someone approaching someone and asking them a question.
Have you really thought about what you're doing? But that, I mean, you're asking for a slap. No, I've just turned up here for the flipping snacks.
Yeah, but just to bar their way, which is what they were doing. In fact, on a particular occasion, I was actually, as I was walking away, they chased after me.
Really?
Yeah,
because they want to fight. This is a slightly hypocritical thing for me to say, given what I do for a living. But they are desperate for an argument all the time.
Oh yeah. I mean, is this the right place for an argument? I mean, definitely it is. But certainly an argument as opposed to a conversation. Which is not what they're about.
Well, I suppose I mean half time for this hour, so we do need to speak to some people who are outraged by the decision to ban these protests. If you are that person, then
I suggest maybe building a moat outside of it as well.
You sound like Donald Trump. 11:30. Don't let him hear you. That'll be next. Build a moat. Build a moat. Do you build a moat or dig it? You dig a moat, right? I think, where we continue to discuss Ealing Council's decision to will ban harassment, intimidation and distress from the abortion clinic in their constituency in Ealing. And I've enjoyed the conversation more than I thought I was going to. The question then becomes, as the last caller suggested, where is the line between, if you like, free speech and things that shouldn't be allowed? And the line Ealing Council have decided is geographical rather than contextual. You can't do it here. Not banning the opinion, not banning the view, not banning the pictures, not banning the pamphlets, whatever it is you do, but you can't do it here. How do you feel about that? And if you've had experience I suppose from either side actually of the protest, I'd love to hear from you as well. 0345 6060 973. Liam's in Croydon. Liam, what would you like to say?
Good morning, Mr. O'Brien, first time caller.
Hello.
Good day. Now, I would just like to give an example of what happened recently in Manchester with Manchester Borough Council. They decided to push through some legislation banning protests outside abortion clinics, and at the same time, they disclosed that they had no evidence. I'm simply asking, where's the evidence of harassment and provocation and intimidation outside these clinics?
How hard have you looked?
Well, James, in this day and age where everyone has mobile phones, you know, it would be fairly easy, I feel, to find evidence of harassment.
So do I. So how hard have you looked?
Yeah. Well, I can only speak as a Catholic, and in terms of James.
How does being a Catholic affect your access to the internet or the news?
Well, that's not what I'm stating here. You know, we have
why are you then? So how hard have you looked for evidence?
We have an organisation called SPUC, the Society for the
Protection of Unborn Children. Yes.
Yeah. Now, I know personally members who protest outside these clinics.
Oh, there's your evidence.
From a Catholic point of view, James, there is no harassment, provocation, intimidation.
So
they've got evidence. They need to present us with it.
Have you been there yourself?
At these clinics, no.
Oh. So you just believe them when they tell you that there hasn't been any harassment?
No, I'm looking for evidence.
I mean, I'm asking how hard you've looked. I'm asking how hard you...
With evidence that there's any harassment. You know, we're talking about a very, very, I think you would agree, a very sensitive subject.
But I don't understand why you've rung me to say that you really want to see some evidence, and then you're kind of admitting that you haven't made any effort at all to find any.
James, I haven't seen evidence.
No, but you haven't looked for any.
These callers have not presented you with any evidence.
They are evidence. Unless you're calling them liars, they are evidence.
Well, let's
the lady in Richmond described what she'd seen with her own eyes, and you've rung in asking for evidence, and I'm asking how hard you've looked for it, and the answer is you haven't looked for it at all, because if you did, you wouldn't be able to ring me up and argue that there wasn't any.
James, you had a caller earlier who said she lived next door to a clinic.
No, she didn't.
Oh, come on.
No, she didn't. She said her doctor's was next door to the clinic. You see, this is what happens when you have a position that you seek to support, but you don't have the facts to support it. She said her doctor's was next door to the clinic, Liam.
It's in the public domain, James, that Manchester City Council agreed they had no evidence, but still...
And I can't wait for you, when we're talking about Manchester City Council, I really look forward to you ringing in, but we're not. We're talking about Ealing, and Heather was talking about Richmond. So I'll ask you again, even though we both know the answer and only one of us is pretending not to understand that. How hard have you looked for the evidence?
James, where is the evidence? Please,
well, you keep listening, because every caller we've had so far, from Richmond to Belfast, has described the evidence of their own eyes. So for the final time, when you rang in to complain that there wasn't any evidence, can I ask how hard have you looked? Where is the evidence? How hard have you looked, Liam?
So are you saying that Manchester City Council are lying, James? I know we're talking about Richmond. I know we're talking about Ealing. Are you saying they're lying?
I'm not saying anybody's lying. I'm saying that the people ringing me today to describe what they've seen with their own eyes are telling the truth. I've got no reason to doubt it. So there is the evidence.
I'll take your word for that. I'll take their word for it.
Well, then we're all square. That was cool. What a waste of both our time. Edie's in Leeds. Edie, what would you like to say?
Hi there. I'm from Ealing. I've been from Ealing my entire life, and I've seen harassment. I've seen the people standing outside the clinics and intimidating women. There's been times where I've been walking past down that road at 11 o'clock at night, and there's been people in hooded figures with signs just staring at the clinic. And even if you're not screaming, the intimidation and the fear that you feel just walking past that clinic is horrendous. Like, I've thankfully never had to use the clinic.
I hope Liam's still listening. This is poor fellow. He's desperate for the evidence, and so it's all being stacked up in front of him. But I want the evidence. Are they open at night, or is the vigil just there for?
I don't know, but the vigil has been there. There's been a few times where I've walked past at night and I have seen people there. But during the day, it's a lot worse. And, like, they have these awful signs, which even if they're not coming up to you, seeing these signs are just so... Like, how is that supposed to make someone who's using this clinic feel? Like, no one is pro-abortion. No one wants to do it. It's not something someone walks across as like, oh, wait, I can't wait to do this. It's an awful and terrifying decision. And to have these people... like saying these things and shouting at you and making you feel like you are less of a person and less of a human because you are undertaking something which I'm sure is one of the hardest decisions someone has to make is not okay. And for all the people saying it's against free speech, I'll question that because the council has not said you are not allowed to say these things.
No, I don't. I guess if there is nuance here, and I don't know whether it's a waste of time to address some of the points that the last fellow made. But I literally just Googled, and the first thing that's come up is a woman being convicted in 2015 of assaulting an employee of the Family Planning Association as she left the clinic, and then she subsequently had to give an had to give a pledge to the court that she would no longer pester or assault Mary Stopes volunteers. And that's why I think when I asked him how hard he looked for the evidence, he didn't want to say, well, I haven't even Googled it, but I'm determined to believe that there isn't any, despite what Edie sees on the streets where she lives, what Heather sees in Richmond, what your man saw in Belfast. I wonder, though, whether or not they should be allowed to do anything outside a clinic. Should they be allowed to stand there quietly saying Hail Marys?
No, personally, I don't think they should.
Why not?
I feel like, well, I understand the idea that you might be against it, but I don't think that the abortion clinic is the right place to protest. If you want to change something, go to the people who can change the issues. Talk to the council. Go to your local elected officials.
Oh, I suppose so. Yeah, go vote. Doff Cap, Tug Forlock, vote Rees-Mogg. I mean, I think he's opposed to abortion, isn't he? The great champion of the people and ordinary working class folk. Thank you. What are you doing in Leeds? Studying?
Yeah, I'm in my final year.
What are you doing?
Politics.
Oh dear. It's all out of date now. It's all out of date by the time you do your finals. You're going to have to start again.
I'm an outdated degree. This is great.
Take care. It used to be like doing history. At least you know it's going to stay the same. 03456. Actually, I don't think we're going to have time for more calls than we've already got. Edie, what a lovely call. CJ is in Thurrock. CJ, what would you like to say?
Okay, so I'm a bit controversial because originally I'm against abortion, but
yes.
I've actually been to this clinic and had to have an abortion there.
Yes.
So I'll tell you a little bit. So I've had like numerous miscarriages trying to have a child.
Yeah.
I just had stomach surgery and I was really sick after. And they found out that when they operated, I was pregnant. Now, I couldn't take in any food or anything. And they said, if I didn't have an abortion, I was going to die. The baby was going to die.
So you had it for medical reasons, as they say.
I had it for medical reasons. So I go down to this clinic and they're there with their teddy bears, like calling you mom, giving you pictures of what looks like almost full-term babies.
Yes, but where is the evidence?
It is psychological harassment.
Yes, but where is the evidence? I know that it happened and I know that you saw it.
That's the evidence.
And I know that, but where is the evidence?
Well, he's not going to find, you know, what sort of evidence do you want?
I have no idea. I'm just being a little bit flippant. I didn't think we'd find much humour in this subject. Yeah, I do. You're not wrong. I didn't think we'd find much humour in this subject, so we all owe Liam in Croydon a debt of gratitude. How hurtful was it? How traumatic did you find it, this harassment and intimidation?
It was hard because, one, I didn't want to do it. Trust me, I was asking the doctors, is there any way we could try and see if I could get through it?
Yes.
And the other thing that I did, I went into that clinic. Now, you have an option of going for medication or not. So apparently, no one has ever not gone for medication, or so they say. I told them I didn't want any medication. I was awake through all of it with no medication. I had an abortion because in my mind, I'm telling my child, at least this is the best I can do to make me feel a bit better.
Oh, sweetheart.
So I went through that pain, and then you come out again, and they're there. And the thing is, sometimes I had to go for a pre-assessment. So you have it when you go there to talk to them about it, although there's no option. And so you got these people there going on like you're the scum of the earth.
But you...
Not understanding...
Well, forgive me. I'm going to... Can I say something a bit unkind?
Go on.
You agree with them?
I did in a sense, because I was sort of the mind that, you know, if you're given a situation, just deal with it.
Yeah.
But I would not go and protest, and I do not feel it's right. You know, let people live their life, let them do what they need to do. I don't judge people in that sense, but to me, if I got pregnant, I'd deal with the situation.
No, I hear you, because I, as a 15-year-old, I was where you were. And then experience led me to a very different conclusion. But as a man, what it taught me was that it's none of my flipping business. So that was my breakthrough moment. But yours... But it was hurtful
for me because, as I said, I've been trying to have kids for about 10 years.
Oh, what a nightmare for you.
All these miscarriages. And then I'm thinking, maybe this, let's see if this one will work. And they're telling me, no, you're going to die.
You
and then you
can't
have
do
to
it.
go and deal with these people throwing pictures of dead babies. And it's not even, they're showing pictures that are pulled off the internet, because in England we have a cut-off point. These pictures of these babies that they're giving you covered in blood are way past those term dates. It makes you feel even worse.
But do you know, what you've reminded me of is why they have to. Because these people, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who believes that if you terminated a pregnancy after being raped, you'd be in the wrong. He'd consider that unacceptable. So for Jacob Rees-Mogg, your termination would have been, in his words, a second wrong. Because as soon as you admit that it's ever okay, you are essentially admitting that a woman should have the right to choose in some circumstances, and they can't ever do that, which is how people like Rees-Mogg end up essentially telling women who've been raped that they should be compelled to go through to full term with the pregnancy. And the idea that you...
Maybe,
go on.
You know, maybe I'm wrong in saying about abortion, and that is wrong. I mean, as I said, if you're given a situation, I feel that there are other ways to try and deal with it. Personally,
yes.
For me, I would not have been, but I know people in my family who have. I don't judge them. I've had friends.
No, well, you that's 3 times you've said that phrase, you don't judge them. And that really is the opposite of the kind of warped 19th century religious attitudes that people like Jacob Rees-Mogg represent. They love nothing more than judging people, usually negatively. But not you, not me, although our upbringing and education may have encouraged us to do so. The curse of an open mind.
Hello, good afternoon to you. It seems to me one of the great things about this country is how we don't always get it right, but how we, more often than not, I think, manage to balance the rights of one another, of each other, so that we can live in a kind of harmony, even if there is disagreement within a particular setting or situation. And I wonder whose rights you think should... or whether you think someone's rights are being contravened in this story. It surrounds Ealing, where councillors, at the London Borough of Ealing, where councillors have unanimously voted to implement a buffer zone around the Mary Stopes Clinic after women complained of intimidation from protesters, from lobbyists, that they might describe themselves differently, when women were going for either advice on or an abortion. Now, the buffer zone, let's call it that, the buffer zone, it will be 100 metres, so that women going into these clinics, into this particular clinic, can do so without close quarters interference or involvement from anybody else. Now, the organisations who carry out these protests, they are varied. Sometimes they're just individuals, sometimes they're organisations. They claim they don't intimidate. They say that they go there either to pray, just to remind the woman that there are options. Some have placards, some don't. Some have religious symbols, some don't. You will view this scenario the way you view it. But I wonder whether you think, for the sake of the rights of the women using this clinic, the rights of the anti-abortion, pro-life groups have been given less attention, less respect? Or do you think it is right that actually, in the case of a woman going for advice about such a sensitive issue as her pregnancy, deserves to have that space, that 100-metre buffer zone between the clinic and anybody else's view of her visit to that clinic? Whose rights, if in this instance somebody's rights have to be given less regard, whose should it be? 0345 606 0973 is the number. You can text 84850 or tweet at LBC. Claire McCulloch joins me, Director for the Good Counsel Network. That's an organisation that does carry out vigils outside clinics such as this one in Ealing. Claire, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Hi.
Firstly, do you believe that the rights of people like yourself have been given less respect?
I believe that the rights of women who are being coerced into abortions, who we are there to serve and help, and who we've helped hundreds of over the last few years, are being given less prominence than, women that are claimed to be distressed by being offered a leaflet. That's what I believe.
And give me an example of some of the examples of coercion that you have come across.
Women being pressured by partners, women being...
Have we lost Claire's line? Can you still hear us, Claire?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Yes, keep going. There is a bit of interference.
Right. Women who have...
We'll get back to Claire on a better line. I think it's clear that that's not a good one. We won't be able to have a conversation on that line. Just imagine it for a moment. If it wasn't abortion, if it was another medical procedure that you were going to either have or to discuss with people in a particular clinic, wouldn't we think it was bizarre that somebody would be allowed to leaflet you, lobby you on the way in to see your GP, or lobby you on the way in to a hospital about any other procedure? Because this is about a pregnancy, because this is about abortion, it's about another life as well as the mother's life. That's why this gets so complicated for people, or it seems to get complicated for people. And I wonder whether you are swayed at all by Claire saying there that actually they're not there to dispute abortion laws. They're there to give vulnerable women being coerced into abortion, or potentially being coerced into abortion, a final chance to look elsewhere for support, to look differently for support. I mean, there are clearly, just because of the testimonies, the accounts that some women have given, there are clearly people who pro-lifers who get this absolutely wrong in terms of the tone that they take with women. But I don't think Claire is one of them. I think we've got Claire back now. Hello, Claire.
Hi,
Claire. Now, I know that you go about what you do with sensitivity and with respect, but what do you say to those who do similar things to you, but do it badly, do it aggressively, do intimidate?
Well, what I say is that I'm not aware of that happening. I'm very much in touch with individuals up and down the country. I see a lot of accusations, usually from anonymous sources, but very little evidence. I mean, it's fair enough to say that women are going to be slow to come forward to complain. But what about clinic staff? They're now getting them to make statements after an 18-month campaign to bring these things to the fore. And some of the statements being made are ludicrous and easily disprovable. I don't see any evidence of harassment. What I see is that they ideologically are opposed to us standing there. The Manifesto Club and Liberty have both opposed this PSPO, and they're both pro-choice organisations who have no time for our vigil. But if no harassment happens there.
But if a woman is going, I understand what you're saying about being a kind of last line of defence in a sense, to say, look, there is an alternative. If you wish to listen to what that alternative is, that's what I'm here for. Here's a leaflet. I get that. But do you understand that even that could be, for a woman who's wrestling with a pregnancy, that even that is an interference too far?
I don't see it as an interference, but I do recognise that a woman who's going for an abortion, who is going to lose her child in that way, even if she thinks it's the best choice for her, may be distressed by seeing a baby in a pushchair on the bus, and equally by a woman standing at a clinic gate with a leaflet. That's why we try and keep our approach to a minimum. But I can't walk away from hundreds of women who feel they have no alternative.
When in fact they do, would be your argument.
They do, and we want to be there. We want to put our hands in our own pockets and, you know, open up the spare bed in the living room. That's what we do, and we want to be there for those women.
And to those who say you're just religiously motivated protesters, I know that's not how you would describe yourself, but...
You know, if I wasn't religious, if I lost my faith tomorrow, I can still see that abortion is a traumatising decision that no one should be forced through. But may I say, you know, there's nothing wrong with being a religious...
No, there isn't. There isn't.
And many of the women who turn around, what's the most common reason they give us for turning around? It's not even money or housing, even though they may need to avail of those things. It's, I prayed about my decision and I asked for a sign. This is hundreds of women. So, you know, there are religious women going into these clinics as well. Why can't they meet religious people outside? We're not forcing our religion down anyone's throat.
It wouldn't happen with any other medical procedure, would it, that somebody is lobbied?
Well, you know, I don't know any other medical procedure that involves ending the life of another person. I mean, obviously there's people who dispute that, but that's what we recognise as happening, and that's what many of the women who choose to accept our help recognise as happening.
Claire, I'm going to thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to leave it there because your line is a bit difficult to hear, but thank you. Claire McCulloch, Director for the Good Counsel Network. We invited onto the programme the groups, some members of the group who have successfully lobbied Ealing Council for the change that's been brought in, but they weren't available to speak to us. Ed in White City is available to speak to us. Hello, Ed. Thanks for calling.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say, Sheila. Yeah, my line probably won't be that much better. I'm normally calling you from Hounslow, but today I'm coming all the way from White City because I'm in the Hammersmith Hospital. I've had a heart attack.
Oh dear.
So,
get well.
Yeah. So I'm a person who is usually at the vigil in Ealing, and as soon as I get out of here, I shall be back there. Nothing will stop me, and nothing that Ealing Council has brought in or may yet bring in further will stop me. So that's it. The fight goes on as far as I'm concerned.
A fight? What are you fighting for?
The fight goes on as far as I'm concerned.
And what is? Tell me what the fight is.
Well, the fight against abortion, the fight against unborn children being put to death at Mattock Lane, the fight against Ealing Council, which is, satanically governed. All of those things are a big fight against...
Satanically governed?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Just because they disagree with you, Ed, you think they're satanic?
Pardon?
Because they disagree with you, you think they're satanic?
No, not because they disagree with me, but because they're evilly motivated. If you look into all that's gone on, I've spoken to some of those councillors who said to me that, they wouldn't be voting in favour of this and that. But when it comes to it, they all vote in unison, believe you me, they're under a directive.
Ed, thank you for your call. Get well in hospital there in White City. Sarah in Ealing, hello.
Hello. I was just in about your last caller.
Yes.
From that rather awful right-wing group.
Do you mean Ed or do you mean Claire McCulloch?
No, I mean Claire.
Go on. Can we keep it respectful? We've already had satanic, so can we keep it respectful?
She said they are not causing harassment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've seen the photos. I've walked past there. They hand out teddy bears to 15-year-old girls. They call them mum on the worst time of their life. You have to push past them to get in the door. So, really, I think they should stay away. If they want to provide support, they can provide support from the other side of the road without blocking the gate.
And when you say pictures, what do you mean by pictures? Do you mean pictures of abortion?
They hand out pictures of what they say is a fetus. It's not. They hand out teddy bears to young girls going through a terrible time. They call them mum on the way in, and they make them feel like crap.
Well, just be careful with your language, Sarah.
Yeah, will do. That was very mild.
It was, but yeah. Nip it in the bud, I say, Sarah.
And Claire is still saying that they're there for support. They're not there to support. And the fact that they've got a man of God sitting there making people feel like lousy, he hasn't even got a wound. It's none of his business.
You mean a priest?
Yeah, well, I cannot say a priest. He may be a vicar, he may be a rector.
I don't really get this. I don't really get this idea that men can't have a view on abortion. Either way, of course they can.
They can have a view, but it's never going to affect them because they get pregnant.
You know, but men are in the mix, Sarah. Men are in the mix. Whether they agree or disagree with abortion, they're allowed to say, aren't they? They're part of the picture.
They're allowed to say, but they're not allowed to abuse innocent women going in for a medical procedure.
Well, to be clear, Claire would say she is absolutely not abusing innocent women, but thank you for your call, Sarah, in Ealing. Thank you, Sarah, calling from Ealing, the very place where this decision has been made. Do you believe that the rights of the woman to have the space, literally the physical space to go into that clinic are to be better protected than the rights of those people who would lobby against abortion and appeal, at best appeal to the people going into those clinics? Their right to have the space to do that. Whose rights matter more in these instances? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. Text 84850. You can tweet at LBC. And just as I said a few moments ago that the group who've won this change from Ealing Council couldn't speak to us, they can now after 2:30. That's all coming up here on LBC. It's 2:16 now. We're talking about this situation in Ealing. Ealing Council has agreed ultimately with a group called Sister Supporter. We'll hear from them in about 10 minutes' time here on LBC. The council voted with them in their efforts to get pro-life groups like the one we've just heard from the Good Counsel Network to stay away from the entrance to an abortion clinic, a Mary Stopes clinic in Ealing. Now, like I said at the very beginning of this hour, I think the balance of people's rights in this country is one of the things we do best. And clearly, the protesters, lobbyists, however they would describe themselves, still have the right to be there, to be present. And if somebody wants to access their thoughts or their leaflets, they can still do that if they go to this clinic. This is the most positive spin on it I can give. But if they don't want that, they can freely walk to the clinic without being interrupted, without being lobbied in any way, without being interfered with in any way. Do you think that is an example of everybody's rights being protected, or do you think that actually the women going into the clinic, and therefore the clinic's rights, have been more protected than those of the lobbyists, the pro-life lobbyists? 0345 606 0973. As I say, we'll hear from Sister Supporter, the group, in a few minutes' time. Gabby's called from Orpington first. Hi, Gabby.
Hi, Sheila. It's Gabby. I just wanted to start by saying I'm currently 6 months pregnant with my daughter. So this is kind of a fairly hot topic for me.
I'm sure.
I'm completely pro-choice. People don't... These protesters, they don't understand or know the reasons these women are getting an abortion. And, there are going to be, some horrific circumstances, I'm sure. But I really struggle with how close these protesters come to what is essentially harassment. And I know people say they're not harassing, but these women don't need to be reminded. I'm sure that they full well know kind of what they're about to go through, or, they know afterwards. I think the support should be offered afterwards. There should be more support for counselling and...
from these groups, or just generally for women?
Well, just generally for women. I mean, if these groups want to run their separate counselling, then do so, but don't do so right in the faces of the people that are about to go through these abortions, because it's not their right. It's not their right to decide what another woman does with their body. And also, I mean, while I'm totally pro-choice, I do struggle with the fact that the limit for an abortion at the moment currently stands at 24 weeks.
You were born at 24 weeks, weren't you?
No, my mum went into labour with me at 23 and a half weeks. The doctors managed to stop the labour. I mean, my mum's waters broke, but they managed to stop the labour, and she was on bed rest for the entirety of the rest of the pregnancy. But I was going to be one of the youngest babies born in England at the time, because they deemed me viable.
And when were you born?
1995.
No, sorry. At which stage in the pregnancy?
They managed to carry. My mum managed to carry me to full term.
Oh, okay.
But it was risky in itself because of sepsis and infection, and so that was
because of the waters having gone. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So my mum was monitored very, very closely for the entirety of the pregnancy. But I haven't thought of the medical kind of side of it, but I do believe, and I hope that one day in the future there'll be a way for the limit to be lowered before 24 weeks.
Well, the way for the limit to be lowered is it can only happen in Parliament, but there's no evidence that there's an appetite for that.
I understand that 20 weeks you've got other anomaly scans and other things show up, and I understand that can't be done any earlier at the moment. Maybe one day in the future it can be. But I do truly believe that these women going into these clinics, they don't need to be reminded, which on probably is one of the worst days of their lives so far, what they're about to go through, and be, even if it's not in your face shaming, it is...
Well, it absolutely shouldn't be that. That's disgraceful if anyone behaves like that.
But the thing is, holding up posters and making shrines and, doing whatever else that they're doing, it's like passive aggressive. It's you don't have to say to someone, you are murdering a baby.
But Gabby, what if, and I haven't been at one of these vigils, so I don't know, and I wasn't with Claire when she says she's successfully given women an option that they really wanted, but what if Claire and others like Claire are right when they say that some women going through those doors don't really want to? They want an alternative, but they're in a life, in a relationship, in a situation where they think there is no alternative. What if, when Claire and her friends show up and say, gently, kindly, compassionately, respectfully, I hope, yes, there is an alternative. What's wrong with that?
It's hard because then you have to weigh up, A, are they actually doing that? And B, how many people are they actually helping by doing that? I think then more is the...
She says hundreds.
The approach. Well, I don't really... I struggle to believe that. But I think then more is the approach is to invest and concentrate more on the prevention and getting these women out of maybe said relationship, said situation, before then they find themselves in the horrific circumstances of going through an abortion. So I think...
Well, it isn't always horrific for people, you know. I've spoken to plenty of women who say it wasn't horrific for them. It was a decision they took, and it was the right decision for them, and they're pleased that they did. So we can't always describe it as horrific, I suppose, can we? Gabby, I wish you well with the rest of your pregnancy. Thank you for calling. Want to hear from Brendan in Ruislip before we go to the news at 2:30. The news headlines. Hello, Brendan.
Hi there, Sheila. You were saying about rights, balancing rights, but the law doesn't actually make rights, does it? Rights are supposed to be inalienable. No one can... They're not given to us by the law, and they can't be taken away by the law.
But they are given by the law, aren't they?
They're not. They're inalienable. The law cannot give you rights, and no one can give...
It can protect them.
A right. Sorry?
It can protect them.
Yeah, but no one actually has a right to kill another human being. That is like the fundamental basis of human rights. An innocent human being cannot be killed. And so when you're saying balancing rights, what one group of here, you've got one group who are killing innocent human beings, and that is an objective fact. It's not my opinion, it's scientific, objective fact. And you've got another group trying their best to defend, they're responding with their duty.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you know it. I'm sure you know it, Brendan, but I'm saying it because it behoves me to say it, that what you regard as a human life is... And again, you say science, it's an objective fact in science. Plenty of scientists and medics will tell you that life is not a full, viable human life until it can live successfully outside of the mother's womb.
Yeah, but that is, again, it's subjective. Objectively, it is a human life. You know, you're saying, OK, you're saying it can't live, but then, you know, lots of people can't live with... No,
I'm not saying that. I'm saying I've said before on air, my own personal view on abortion is a very small c conservative one for myself, but I don't believe that there shouldn't be access for women who want abortion or who want to discuss it. I don't think the heavy hand of the state is the right way to go with abortion. But you know, for me, it is human life. But Brendan, you know,
surely we have to protect human life, Sheila. This is a really bad direction.
Ireland.
Once we give the state the power to define who is a human being and who isn't, then we are going down a really, really dangerous road.
Well, in Britain, we don't equate the life of the mother with the child, do we? Or the mother with the fetus, as the lingo would go. But that battle, that argument is being waged in Ireland right now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You know, but it's as you say there in Britain. But you know, we shouldn't get away from like objective facts. You know, that we can't redefine what reality is. You know, it's a human being is a human being, and once we start saying that the government or the Irish government or this government or, you know, this is like what the Nazis did back in Germany. You know, they say that certain people don't have a right to live, and we really, really, really have to stick with objective truth.
Brendan, thank you very much for your call. I know a lot of you listening to Brendan there will disagree with you, with him about when a fetus becomes a fully viable human life with human rights. But thank you for your call, Brendan. Do call if you want to respond to what he said. 0345 6060 973, the number to call. We'll hear from that group, that sister supporter they're called, the group behind the Ealing pro-choice campaign, the successful campaign that they've waged in Ealing. It's 2:30 now. Keep your calls coming and your texts. I'll read some of your texts in a moment on this decision in Ealing by Ealing Council to provide a 100-metre buffer zone for women going to the Mary Stopes abortion clinic there. Eve Valio-White joins me, and I'm delighted to say, from the Sister Supporter campaign. We couldn't speak to them earlier in the programme, but we can now. A successful campaign, Eve. We're getting a real mixture of calls here saying that actually some of these groups are providing a genuinely needed service of support for women as they go in. What do you say to those people?
Well, we say that, of course, if you want to help women, that is fine. But why not set up a properly vetted, regulated, unbiased service that women can be referred to through the proper channels without having to approach every single person that comes in and out of the clinic in ways that are often deemed distressing and intimidating? That's unnecessary. You're able to help women without doing that. And I think that actually at the crux of this is not the desire to help women. It's actually an ideological opposition to abortion in the first place.
And if someone is personally ideologically opposed to abortion and has things to say to an individual about that, is that acceptable?
I mean, everybody is completely free to hold their own views on abortion. We have members of our group that are themselves pro-life but are opposed to the activities of the groups outside of the clinic. So we're talking here about context and where this discussion should take place and how appropriate it is to approach people at the point of access. And we think at the moment there's actually a real imbalance in the rights. The rights of the people to express their views is far superseding the rights of women to access a legal healthcare service with their anonymity intact and physical and emotional well-being intact as well.
How much do you know about the counselling services that take place inside the Mary Stopes Clinic? For example, is a woman questioned about whether she's been coerced into the abortion or not?
Yes, absolutely. It's a part of the procedure. They have to take the woman in for a one-on-one to make sure that the woman is not being coerced. There's a lot of procedures they have to follow, and the woman can be referred to counselling. If she is not sure that she wants to go through the procedure, they will encourage the woman to go away, take time, and make their decision.
So do you think that they encourage that already inside those doors, the activities that organisations like the Good Counsel Network say they want to offer already exist inside those clinics?
There are counselling services that are available, and there are limited services available for some of the women that Good Counsel Network have spoken about, and we think that that is also imbalanced. But like I said before, if you want to properly help women, especially those who are most vulnerable, set up a proper service that they can be referred to. If they had a vetted service, Marie Stopes and other medical facilities could then refer women to their services. So they'd actually probably reach more women that way.
Would you work with them to create such an organisation?
I would be willing, yeah, and I'm sure Sister Supporter too would support an organisation that went through proper protocol and was not motivated by what seems to be a religious agenda as the way it is now. I think that would be a positive thing.
But if the agenda is religious, as in the person's religion is their motivating force for their belief that a woman needs more options when she's pregnant and thinking about an abortion, that's not inherently a bad thing, is it?
No, it's not inherently a bad thing. But what we've seen is that the agenda of the groups is religiously motivated, and actually they quite often state that the motivation is to end abortion one baby at a time, not we want to help give women options. That's not the bottom line, and I think that's what the problem is when your ideology is being imposed on somebody else. And the language used, one of the council officers who was investigating was told on her way out of the clinic while she was there in an official capacity, pray so you don't end up back here. The baby that died will be with God now. That's not a judgment-free offer of help, and that is, an appropriation of religious language that is going to make for somebody feel judged and shamed.
Do you now take your campaign, borough by borough?
Well, ideally, we are looking for a national solution. The Home Secretary Amber Rudd has just closed the national consultation. So we look to the results of that because we think ideally a national solution is needed. But we are consulting with other councils and other groups that are campaigning and would be happy to consult anybody and any councils looking to put in something similar. And if that's what we need in the meantime before legislation is passed, then sure.
OK, thank you. Good to talk to you, Eve. Eve Vellier-White from Sister Supporter, the campaign, the successful campaign in Ealing at least, to create a buffer zone around the clinic for women going either to have an abortion or for advice about their pregnancy. Thank you. Kate's call from Exeter on this. Hello, Kate.
Hi.
You've been in a situation where you were being pressured to have an abortion. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, I was 18 at the time. I fell pregnant just before I went to university with a man I'd known for several years, and he was quite a bit older. When he found out I was pregnant, he really coerced me into having a termination. I'm a little bit upset talking about it. Lots of physical threats. It was a very abusive relationship. I didn't want to have an abortion at all. I absolutely wanted to keep what I felt was a child, and that caused a lot of problems between us.
Mm-hmm. And you were only 18.
Yeah, I was 18. He was in his late 20s, but I know 18 is sort of the age of an adult, but you can.
No, it's very young. Yeah.
I went to my GP. I told him I was pregnant. He sort of responded with like, "Oh, unfortunately." Everyone was very negative about it. I was going to university and I was 18, and it was almost like expected that I was going to have an abortion. Like, that's how people deal with pregnancies, right? But I was very much like, no, this is my child and I want to keep it, and no one can stop me going to university just because I have a child. But it was almost like a conveyor belt, the experience. Like, the GP referred me to the clinic, who phoned me up with a male counsellor who said, "Are you pro-choice?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he was like, "Well, I don't understand why you're upset." Yeah, it was.
Where was this?
This is 10 years ago now.
But in a clinic?
Yes.
So there was an assumption that you would, because you were pro-choice, you would breeze through an abortion?
Right, precisely. I am absolutely pro-choice. Like, I've supported friends through terminations, even though it's been quite painful for me to watch, and I've personally been like, no, I want to tell them not to do it, but obviously I'm not going to tell another woman not to do it, and I certainly wouldn't have a termination if I got pregnant again. When I went to the clinic on the day, it was, I was all over the place. I was disassociating. I didn't feel that I could approach the vigil protesters for them to help me. I was really intimidated by them, and all I wanted was...
What intimidated you? Their very presence or their behaviour?
It was more that there was an essence of religious ideologies. There was a lot of older, almost angry men, which as a young girl, I thought, I can't talk to them. It was in public as well, and I felt like I can't stay in public talking to people about my pregnancy because someone might see me and my mum might find out. And I was like... And
also, the pavement isn't the place to have that conversation, is it?
No, I needed to get inside as quickly as possible because I was like having a panic attack almost. And also, I just didn't want to be spotted in public.
And Kate, can I ask you, you've mentioned your GP, you've mentioned your boyfriend, obviously the father of the baby, but your then boyfriend. What about other support? Parents, friends, former teachers?
I didn't tell anyone. My mum at the time was very, very poorly, and she had been in and out of being sectioned, and I felt at the time I couldn't put this on her because she needed to get better and she needed to get well. So what I wanted to do was keep the pregnancy, and maybe the 4-month mark, when she's had time to get stable, tell her, "Oh, your teenage daughter's pregnant." It was so difficult to sort of weigh up, obviously my needs against her needs. But for me, I felt, well, I'm a mother now, and she's my mother, and I've got to look after my child. At the time, though, I just felt like no one was listening to me, and there was this dramatic, angry rhetoric flying around from pro-choice people, from pro-life people, and I was stuck in the middle, like, no one's listening to me, and no one's helping me, and I have no idea what to do. And yeah, I ended up having the abortion because I rushed through past the protesters, and as soon as I was into the clinic, I felt I couldn't go back. I've never been like one to challenge authority. So I was waiting in the clinic for someone to say, are you still okay? Do you want to go through this? It never happened. And obviously, I was like a child, and an adult's beckoning me into this room, and I was like, okay, well, I've got to go in.
So you didn't have anyone ask... Did anyone ask you if you were being coerced?
No. The last caller who said that, if that's true now, then I'm really, really glad that's been put in place, because 10 years ago, when I had my termination, the woman didn't even look me in the eye. She just handed me the pill, which I then took and went home and had a miscarriage. And I had to get a train home because there was no one in my local town, like a clinic.
Oh, Kate,
So
I want to reach back to your 18-year-old self and take you home and look after you. That is awful. You were on your own completely.
I just feel like the sides attack each other so much. They forget that there are young people in the middle of this who just want someone to say, look, this is how you get support. This is how you can apply for a flat somewhere.
Give you a bit of time.
No one helped me. The pro-choice people didn't help me. The pro-life people didn't help me. You know, when they're saying things like murderer, it doesn't make you want to talk to them. And I wish that I had found someone who was not necessarily pro-life, but like was
pro-Kate. Pro-Kate.
Yeah, exactly. And I look at them now and I think you're doing the opposite to what you want, because people don't want to talk to you when you're being so loud and angry. It's so frightening to be pregnant and an 18. Like,
of course.
I know that they're passionate about it. I'm passionate about it too, but it is so scary. And maybe it is just a small minority, but it's absolutely terrifying to be 18 and know that, you know, people can get quite aggressive and not want to deal with that. And yeah, like I said earlier, I just hurried past them.
Well, Kate, I think you've given thanks very much for taking the time and having the bravery to talk about it, because it clearly still affects you. And, you know, I think your story is really instructive, actually, for all of us, whatever your view is on abortion, whatever your view is on these clinics and these groups. It's young women like Kate are at the centre of this, and their pregnancy, their baby, their fetus, depending on what language you use. That's what's at the heart of all of this. And clearly, and the medical profession needs to ask itself questions sometimes. If somebody can go to their GP and have the experience that Kate had, and go to a clinic and have the experience that Kate had, both outside the door and inside the door. Nobody got that right, did they? 0345 6060 973, the number to call. More of your calls and texts and tweets in just a moment. Greg has called on this from Sidcup. Hello, Greg. This being, sorry, in case people are just tuning in, this being Ealing Council's decision to provide 100-metre buffer zones around the Mary Stopes abortion clinic. Greg, fire away with your thoughts.
Honestly, I think this is a really bad thing. In the past, certainly in the past sort of 20 years or so, we've had, I think, 6 or 7 young ladies stay with us in our home who, in fact, had gone to the clinics. What they told us was that they had no counselling. It was primarily geared really just to, the assumption really was that they would have abortions. But they stayed with us. Some stayed the whole 8 months or so. Some stayed, only maybe 6 months. But all of them stayed.
And how did this staying with you and presumably your wife come about?
Organisations like the Good Counsel, I think Network was certainly one of them, but several of them. They obviously have a network, and we'd put our names down, and they simply called and said, "Is it possible for us to take a girl or help a girl in this particular?" We have a spare room, and they were able to stay with us, and we could give them the support. We helped them with baby clothes. We helped them with whichever way they really wanted, and they stayed with us. One of the girls, for instance, became pregnant after, I think, a Christmas party. She didn't want her parents to know. She didn't want friends and colleagues to know. And so she stayed with us. Very happy. We, in fact, became the godparents of the child.
But presumably her parents and friends found out eventually, did they?
I don't know. I know she, but the one I'm thinking of, had the child adopted immediately at birth. So we're basically in London, and I think her parents were up north. But no, and it just seems to me, what Claire actually said is correct. They've actually helped several hundred, probably 500-600 girls over the years. And the reality now is that won't be an opportunity for any of these girls, because... Well,
they will. They're still there. They're just not so close to the front door.
Sure, but the reality is that they're 100. I don't know the situation there.
It's 100 meters.
It's much more difficult now. You can't even give if you could give a leaflet out, there's a telephone number, and then no doubt people do actually phone up and say, "Look, this is my situation. Can you help me?"
What about the point that my guest from Sister Supporter made when she said, you know, if organisations like the Good Counsel Network became properly, officially accredited as a source of pregnancy and abortion advice,
they are officially accredited in the same way. I mean, they have trained counsellors. I'm not sure.
I just mean in terms of, for example, when I don't know whether you heard my call just a moment ago from Kate, you know, when she went to her GP, if her GP isn't equipped to give advice one way or another, then wouldn't it be great if the GP could say, well, look, if you're certain you want an abortion, contact the Mary Stopes Clinic in Ealing. If not, this organisation, the Good Counsel Network, accredited, safe people that, you know, are recognised by the government as a good organisation, then you might want to go to them for other advice. And not just those two. I mean, whatever advice a person needs, whatever...
I agree with you. It would be great if that was... But unfortunately...
But why the need to stand on a pavement? A pavement isn't the place to discuss this, is it?
Well, I agree with you, but at the same time, there is no mechanism in place currently for women to actually... For instance, a doctor will not... the doctors primarily just focus on the abortion clinics. You're thinking of having abortion, go and speak to the abortion clinics. Now, the abortion clinics, you must remember, are paid for each abortion they have. So they have...
I think you do a disservice to many GPs, maybe not all, but to many GPs, to think that they would just blithely say, no discussion, go and have an abortion.
Well, to some degree, I do know that. I'm not saying that they would do that, but they would certainly have a conversation with the girl. She says, I'm thinking of having an abortion. They will provide them with materials. But if she says, I'm not sure, they would not directly send them to, let's say, the Good Counsel or other networks.
No, but they would. But they would counsel them themselves or send them to counsellors. You know,
No, as you quite rightly said, you know, they've got 3 minutes, 5 minutes. They haven't got really the time. And I know quite a number of GPs who actually refuse to participate in the whole abortion thing. It is very, very difficult. I think the government does need to sort of say, look, they are, or at least provide balanced resources.
Yes, but advice shouldn't be given on the pavement, should it, about something as serious as this? I think that's the weak spot for organisations like the Good Counsel Network. It seems to me that the advice is given on the street or offered on the street. You know, that there are ways and means of dealing with people's medical questions and fears, and I'm not sure leaflets on a pavement is the way forward, whether it's about abortion or anything else. Greg, thank you very much for your call, Greg in Sidcup. A brief word with Tom in Maple Cross before we go to the news at 3. Tom, hello.
Hi. When it comes to abortion, I think a lot of focus is on whether the fetus is human or not, but it's my opinion that it doesn't actually matter whether the fetus is human, because I don't think the mother should be forced to use her body to, like, for her child. It's similar, in my opinion, to if you had an actual child, a parent can't be forced to give up their kidney or another organ, even if the child might die. And
getting a bit philosophical here, Tom. I mean, feel free, but...
I just think a lot of focus is put on whether the fetus is human or not, and I don't think that's particularly relevant
Your focus is the mother is human and she has rights to choose what she does.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much indeed for your call, Tom, in Maple Cross. I'm sorry, I didn't get to read as many of your tweets and texts as I would like. I'll keep them up, actually, and maybe I'll do so in the next hour.